People have very strange ideas about money. They think the game ends when you hit a certain number. A million, 5 million, 10 million. The truth? Most people have no idea what they're even chasing. They just want more because everyone else does. I've met men with $10 million who are miserable, and men with 200,000 who sleep like babies. Guess which one is richer? It's not about the number. It's about control of your time, your mind, and your obligations. If your money owns you, you're not rich. You're just well decorated. People ask me all the time, Charlie, how much money do you need to feel comfortable? And I tell them, comfort doesn't come from money. It comes from not being stupid. You can be poor and peaceful if you avoid idiocy. You can be rich and miserable if you chase status. The world confuses comfort with consumption. The middle class wants security but buys luxury. The wealthy want freedom but chain themselves to appearance. Both end up broke in different ways. Let me tell you something. If you think you need $10 million to live well, you've already lost, because you're building a lifestyle that depends on a treadmill. The right question isn't how much money is enough. It's how much stupidity can you remove from your financial life? Once you stop doing dumb things, wealth takes care of itself. People make their lives harder than they have to be. They buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like with money they don't really have. That's not ambition, it's insecurity wearing a Rolex. When I was young, I saw plenty of people who made money fast. Almost all of them found a way to lose it just as fast. It wasn't bad luck, it was bad behavior. They couldn't sit still. They had to chase the next thrill. In markets or in life, the inability to do nothing is fatal. Here's a rule worth remembering. You don't need to get rich twice. The first time is hard enough. The second time means you were stupid. People love talking about financial independence, but most of them want independence from responsibility, not from dependence. They dream of passive income while keeping active stupidity. True independence is the ability to live below your means without feeling deprived. That's the foundation. Everything else is decoration. Now, I'm not against wealth. I've spent a lifetime helping to create it, but always for a purpose, never for show. There's a difference between rich and wealthy. Rich is a number, wealthy is a mindset. Rich buys yachts, wealthy buys time. If you can wake up when you want, work with people you respect, and say no to nonsense, you've won the game, whether your net worth is 50,000 or 50 million. But most people won't believe that. They think freedom requires fortune. They think peace requires possessions. They think happiness is just a few more dollars away. That's the illusion, the constant postponement of satisfaction. You tell yourself you'll rest when you reach the next milestone, then the next, and eventually you die, still chasing the next one. I've seen this pattern my entire life. Investors, executives, doctors, lawyers, brilliant people who spent 40 years climbing the ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. Money doesn't fix that. It just buys you a better view from the wrong ladder. Real wealth starts when you stop measuring it by digits. It begins when you stop needing external validation. The market doesn't care how smart you look. The world doesn't owe you admiration, and your bank account doesn't define your worth. Your behavior does. You can live well with a modest fortune if you have discipline and perspective. You can live poorly with an empire if you have envy and ego. I call that the paradox of prosperity. People spend their youth trading time for money, then spend their old age trading money for time. They could have skipped the whole loop by learning early what matters most. I'm not saying poverty is noble. I'm saying extravagance is foolish. Between those extremes lies something wonderful. Enough. Enough means you don't wake up in panic. Enough means you don't worship luck. Enough means you can think clearly without the noise of greed. But modern culture hates that word. Enough doesn't sell. It doesn't trend. It doesn't make your neighbor jealous. So people ignore it and end up slaves to excess. I'm telling you this as someone who's seen both sides. We built fortunes at Berkshire not by chasing fantasies, but by avoiding idiocy. Warren and I didn't need 20 mansions or 5 yachts. We just needed peace of mind and the ability to keep playing the game. The game isn't about getting rich. It's about staying rational long enough to let compounding do the work. And you can't stay rational if you're always craving more. So start by asking yourself a simpler question. How much stupidity am I willing to eliminate today? Because that's where real wealth begins. In subtraction, not addition. The problem isn't that people don't make enough money. It's that they don't know what to do once they have it. Give an average person $50,000 and they'll buy comfort. Give them $500,000 and they'll buy complication. Give them $5 million and they'll buy stupidity. The tragedy of modern life is that the more people earn, the less they think. They don't study risk. They study lifestyle. They don't ask, how can I protect my capital? They ask, what car fits my new salary? That's not progress. That's financial adolescence. People love to say they're investing in themselves. Though, usually that means buying something they'll regret in 6 months. The brain loves novelty. The wallet pays the price. I've seen this since the 1950s. America built a middle class on discipline and savings, and then slowly destroyed it with credit cards and ego. The television told them what success looked like, and they bought the lie one installment plan at a time. You can't compound wealth if you're busy compounding payments. A lot of people claim they're working for freedom. In truth, they're just financing their own captivity. New cars, bigger homes, nicer vacations. Every upgrade quietly becomes an obligation. And the weight of those obligations is what keeps them running in circles. They're not free, they're leveraged. You can't talk about financial freedom without talking about restraint. Discipline is the foundation of wealth, not talent, not timing, not luck, just the boring habit of not being an idiot. But that's not a popular message. People want a secret formula. They want the shortcut that turns average income into luxury living. They don't want to hear that. The real shortcut is just avoiding debt, saving early, and letting compounding do its job. Every generation thinks it's smarter than the one before it, and every generation repeats the same mistakes. I've watched people chase the next hot stock, the next real estate boom, the next magic crypto scheme. They call it innovation. I call it sophisticated greed. The faces change. The stupidity doesn't. You want to know the biggest financial trap? Comfort. The moment people taste a better lifestyle, they confuse it with success. They stop thinking, how can I make my life efficient? And start thinking, how can I keep this comfort level forever? That's the addiction nobody talks about. Not alcohol, not drugs. Comfort. It kills ambition quietly and makes you rationalize mediocrity. I've seen sharp, ambitious people turn into financial zombies because they couldn't downgrade their lifestyle. They knew the math didn't work, but pride overruled arithmetic. That's how $1 million earner ends up broke in 10 years. Too proud to live like a sane person. The world rewards appearances. Your neighbor doesn't know your net worth. He knows your car, your clothes, and your vacations. So you play along until the game plays you. The average person never learns that wealth isn't about how much you earn. It's about how much you keep after taxes, inflation, and stupidity. I call it the 3 silent killers. Inflation eats your money. Taxes take their share. And stupidity finishes the job. The first 2 you can't control much. The third one you can. That's why I focus all my energy there. People talk about financial literacy. I prefer financial humility. Knowing what you don't know will save you more money than any investment course or guru ever will. You don't need to predict the next big thing. You just need to avoid the next dumb thing. And believe me, they come every year, just wrapped in a new buzzword. I remember in 1999, people thought the internet erased business cycles. In 2008, they thought housing prices could never fall. In 2021, they thought crypto was the new gold. It's always the same song, different chorus. The smartest investors I know don't chase trends. They chase survival. They want steady returns, not viral headlines. They understand that boredom is the price of stability, but the average person hates boredom. They want excitement in their portfolio and peace in their life without realizing the two don't coexist. If you crave adrenaline, go skydiving. Don't do it with your retirement money. The real financial trap is this. People believe wealth will make them disciplined. It doesn't. It only magnifies who they already are. If you're impulsive when you're broke, you'll be destructive when you're rich. You can't outsource character. You can't bud judgment. And you can't fix stupidity with income. So if you want freedom, stop worshiping income. Worship restraint. Learn to enjoy simplicity. Learn to say no when it's unpopular. Learn to delay gratification long enough for compounding to start working in your favor, because that's what separates the financially free from the financially trapped. Not opportunity, not intelligence, but the simple ability to sit still while everyone else is losing their minds. People complicate money. They turn it into philosophy, psychology, even spirituality. But at its core, money is arithmetic, addition, subtraction, and restraint. You don't need a degree from Harvard to understand it. You just need to stop lying to yourself. Let me give you a secret. Financial freedom isn't mystical. It's math. You can live well, not extravagantly, but well, on a modest fortune if you think clearly. $500,000 can buy freedom for life. If you handle it the way an adult handles fire carefully. Here's the logic. Put $500,000 into conservative investments. Fixed income, government bonds, high yield savings, maybe a few quality equities. A 5% return gives you $25,000 a year. A 9% return gives you $45,000. That's it. No miracle, no genius, just arithmetic. Now, the average person hears those numbers and panics. 45,000? I can't live on that. That's because they've built a lifestyle that requires permanent adrenaline to sustain. If your idea of comfort includes constant consumption, you've misdefined comfort. The truth is, in most parts of the world, $45,000 a year is enough to live peacefully. If you own your home, avoid debt, and stop trying to impress strangers. It's not glamorous. It's not Instagram worthy, but it's sane. Sanity doesn't get enough credit in finance. It's underrated precisely because it's boring. I've always said the best investment strategy is the one you can stick with while half the world loses its mind. The same goes for your spending habits. If you need external excitement to feel alive, your bank account will always suffer. The real game is endurance, not speed. People say, Munger, you and Buffett had billions. Sure, but we lived like people who didn't need to prove it. That's why we kept it. Most high-income earners never learn this. They think financial freedom comes when income exceeds expenses. No, it comes when ego stops exceeding logic. You can't buy peace of mind with higher yield. You buy it by lowering your dependence on yield. Look at how fragile most people's lives are. One job loss, one medical bill, one bad quarter, and the house of cards falls. That's not freedom. That's leverage disguised as success. Freedom means this. Your basic life continues quietly, predictably, even if the market closes for 5 years. You sleep the same whether rates go up or down. You don't check your net worth every morning because your self-worth isn't tied to it. That's the math I care about. Now, if you want the technical side, fine. Take that $500,000, earn 5%, reinvest part of the income, and let inflation do what it does. If you can grow your principal by even 3% a year, you're maintaining purchasing power. That's what matters, not the number, but the durability. Compounding is magic only for the patient. Everyone else treats it like gambling. They interrupt it every time they get bored. Warren once said, "It's not about being smarter, it's about being more rational for longer." He's right. We got rich by sitting on our asses, not by jumping off cliffs. If you think you're too smart for steady returns, the market will humble you. And if you think you're too rich to care about small percentages, inflation will eat you alive. The difference between wealth and freedom is that wealth without discipline decays. Freedom without restraint collapses. People underestimate what modest capital can do when paired with consistency. $500,000 invested soundly beats 10 million managed emotionally, because when fear and greed control the ship, math doesn't matter, behavior does. Think about it. A disciplined investor can live off interest indefinitely, preserving the principal and letting compounding handle the rest. But a reckless spender can destroy a fortune faster than compound interest can save it. The hardest part of money is not making it, it's keeping it when your ego says you deserve more. I once told a young investor, "You don't need to make more money. You need fewer stupid expenses." He laughed until his lifestyle ate his profits. Here's another truth most won't admit. If you can't be happy with modest comfort, you'll never be happy with excess. You'll just scale your misery. I've seen men upgrade from a Honda to a Rolls Royce and downgrade their peace of mind. Turns out the car runs fine, but the brain starts leaking sanity at 70 miles an hour. Freedom isn't about retiring early or buying a beach house. It's about reclaiming your time, your focus, and your choices. When your income covers your life without anxiety, you're wealthier than 90% of people on the planet. But we're trained not to notice that. Advertising and envy make us blind. They sell us the idea that life is a contest of consumption. It's not. It's a test of self-control. So the simple math of freedom goes like this. Earn enough to cover your real needs. Spend far below your means. Invest the surplus in assets that don't keep you up at night. Repeat for 20 years. It's dual. It's slow. It's the most effective wealth machine ever invented. But very few can do it, because very few can sit still long enough to let boring arithmetic turn into quiet freedom. People overestimate intelligence and underestimate discipline. They think wealth is about IQ, timing, or luck. It isn't. It's about temperament. I've met geniuses who couldn't stay solvent. They could quote Keynes but couldn't balance a checkbook. Their problem wasn't brains, it was behavior. In investing and in life, behavior beats brilliance every time. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be consistently reasonable. But reasonable isn't sexy. Discipline doesn't trend. And patience rarely makes headlines. That's why the world keeps producing clever failures. Let me tell you something about wealth. It doesn't reward excitement, it rewards endurance. The market pays people who can sit still while everyone else panics, tweets, or speculates. Most people can't do that. They think activity equals progress. In reality, it equals friction. Every unnecessary move erodes capital just like erosion wears down rock. When I say discipline, I'm not talking about spreadsheets or strict budgets. I'm talking about mental clarity, the ability to say no 10 times more often than you say yes. Discipline is simply sustained rationality, and sustained rationality is rarer than diamonds. Look at any long-term winner, not just in investing, but in anything. The pattern is the same. They made a few big decisions, right? And then avoided stupidity for decades. That's it. No secret formula. Just a stubborn refusal to self-destruct. We built Berkshire on this idea. Warren and I didn't chase every deal. We waited for the obvious ones. Sometimes, for years, the waiting made us rich. Everyone wants our results. No one wants our patience. The irony is, discipline doesn't even require suffering. It just requires boredom tolerance. But modern culture has zero tolerance for boredom. People would rather lose money than feel unstimulated. They call it staying active. I call it financial self-sabotage. Here's how discipline really works. You decide what game you're playing. You define what winning looks like, and then you ignore everything else. If you don't define the game, you'll end up playing someone else's, usually a dumb one. In money, the dumbest game is envy. Trying to outspend, outinvest, or outshine others is how intelligent people quietly destroy themselves. I've seen brilliant doctors, lawyers, and CEOs turn their lives into debt factories just to keep up appearances. They weren't greedy, they were weak. They couldn't stand the idea of looking less successful. The inability to ignore others is one of the most expensive habits on earth. Discipline fixes that. It teaches you to think independently, to make decisions based on arithmetic, not applause. You'll notice something funny when you start living that way. The world stops making sense to you. People celebrate things that actually make them poorer. They cheer for risk they don't understand and laugh at caution they desperately need. Don't join them. Being different isn't arrogance, it's survival. A disciplined investor is like a chess player who only moves when the position is right, not because the clock is ticking. Meanwhile, the average investor plays like a gambler at a slot machine. Every pull feels like control. Every loss feels like bad luck. That's how markets and casinos make their money. Let me give you a formula I like. Discipline equals clarity times patience. Ego. You remove ego from the equation, and suddenly compounding becomes effortless. If you let ego creep in, you'll try to prove you're right instead of trying to be rich. That's the beginning of every financial disaster I've ever witnessed. People always ask, what's the key to long-term success? I tell them, don't interrupt compounding unnecessarily. That's another way of saying, don't do something stupid just because you're bored. The world is full of intelligent people who can't resist sabotaging themselves at the worst possible time. They get greedy in booms, fearful in busts, and restless in between. Discipline is what keeps you from joining that parade of fools. It's the ability to stay logical while everyone else is emotional. It doesn't mean you never make mistakes. It means you make fewer and you survive them. Survival's underrated in investing. People chase growth, but forget survival is the prerequisite to growth. You can't compound what doesn't exist. Here's a test. If you can sit through a market crash without panic selling, if you can go a year without upgrading your lifestyle, if you can reinvest dividends instead of spending them, you're already ahead of 90% of investors. Discipline is cumulative. Every rational decision strengthens the next one. Eventually, your life becomes a compounding machine. Not just your money, but your habits, your judgment, your peace of mind. That's how wealth quietly builds. Not with genius, but with consistency. Not with boldness, but with restraint. The market doesn't reward brilliance. It rewards endurance wrapped in humility. The tragedy is that most people can't endure prosperity. They think making money proves they're smart, and that arrogance eventually wipes them out. The truth is simple. To get rich, you need discipline. To stay rich, you need it forever. The fastest way to destroy wealth isn't a market crash. It's comfort. Once people get a taste of luxury, they start confusing it with happiness. They call it rewarding themselves, as if overspending were an achievement. I've seen this play out for 70 years. It's always the same pattern. Income rises, humility vanishes, stupidity enters. First, they upgrade their car, then their house, then their expectations. That's the real inflation. Nobody measures. Expectation inflation. When your expectations rise faster than your earnings, you'll never feel rich, no matter what you make. You could be earning $200,000 a year and still be broke because you built a lifestyle that needs $300,000 to sustain. Lifestyle inflation is a polite term for self-sabotage. You don't see the damage immediately, but over time, every upgrade becomes a shackle. A bigger house means higher taxes, more maintenance, more furniture, more clutter. A fancy car means more insurance, more repairs, and more stress. When someone scratches it at the grocery store, the irony is that every purchase meant to bring joy usually ends up bringing anxiety. You can't enjoy freedom when your possessions own you. You're not living better, you're managing more stuff. People talk about financial freedom while building lifestyles that require permanent servitude to maintain. That's not freedom, that's golden slavery. Let me put it bluntly. If you need to keep earning at a frantic pace just to sustain your image, you're not successful, you're trapped. The world sells the illusion that comfort scales with spending. It doesn't past a certain point. Every extra dollar buys smaller returns in satisfaction and larger risks to your independence. I've met men who own everything and enjoy nothing. They spend their days managing problems created by their own appetite for more. Every luxury adds a layer of obligation. And the more obligations you have, the less flexible your life becomes. Flexibility is wealth. When you can walk away from nonsense, you're richer than the man with 10 million tied up in status. But try telling that to someone who just financed a new lifestyle. They'll tell you they're investing in happiness. That's marketing language for digging a hole I'll regret later. People think freedom means buying what they want. It actually means wanting less. Once you learn to do that, you'll be untouchable. Here's what nobody tells you. Every dollar you don't spend has compound value. Every habit of restraint multiplies over time. Every unnecessary purchase steals a little bit of your future. The math is simple but brutal. Spend $500 a month on nonsense, and you're burning $6,000 a year, $60,000 a decade. Invest that instead, and compounding turns it into hundreds of thousands. That's the quiet difference between the comfortable and the desperate. But people don't see the trade-off because it's invisible. They only notice the fun they're missing today, not the freedom they're losing tomorrow. Discipline feels like sacrifice until compounding makes it look like genius. You know who understands this instinctively? Old people who lived through the Great Depression. They don't waste. They don't show off. They know the joy of having enough and the terror of losing it. They'd rather mend a shirt than buy a new one. That mindset built durable wealth, the kind that survives wars, recessions, and stupidity. Today we treat thrift like an insult. People brag about spending, not saving. They confuse liquidity with status. When I hear someone say, "You only live once," I know they're about to do something financially idiotic. Yes, you only live once, but if you do it wrong, once is enough. The real joy of wealth isn't luxury. It's autonomy. It's waking up and realizing you own your day. No alarms, no bows, no panic. And the tragedy is people trade that away for a new kitchen countertop or a car that depreciates faster than their sanity. Lifestyle inflation is a disease of the ego. It's the belief that external upgrades will fix internal emptiness. They won't. They'll just make you busier. Here's the paradox. You spend the first half of your life earning money to upgrade your lifestyle, then the second half trying to simplify it again. You buy space, then spend decades filling it with junk, only to pay movers and therapists to help you get rid of it later. Minimalism isn't trendy philosophy, it's rational arithmetic. The fewer things you need to be happy, the more resilient you become. Warren and I lived modestly for a reason, not because we were frugal for sport, but because simplicity keeps you sane. It keeps your judgment clear. It removes noise from your life so your brain can focus on things that actually compound knowledge, relationships, and good decisions. You can't think clearly when your calendar and your closet are both overflowing. You can't make rational choices when your self-worth depends on your purchases. If you want to be wealthy, learn to live below your means. If you want to stay wealthy, learn to enjoy living below your means. Because here's the final truth. If you need more money to feel free, you'll never be free no matter how much you make. Freedom is a psychological dividend of discipline. And discipline is free if you're strong enough to use it. People love to talk about making money. Almost nobody wants to talk about keeping it. But wealth isn't what you earn. It's what you keep after stupidity, taxes, and inflation have taken their bite. The great investors, the real ones, not the Twitter prophets, understand that the first rule of compounding is simple. Don't interrupt it. And yet, interruption is the favorite hobby of mankind. They can't help themselves. A new tip, a new technology, a new sure thing, and suddenly decades of patience vanish overnight. It's not markets that destroy fortunes. It's behavior. You see, wealth is fragile. It takes discipline to build and only one dumb decision to cripple. The higher you climb, the more gravity there is to pull you down. That's why capital preservation isn't glamorous, it's sacred. It's the foundation of every fortune that lasts longer than a news cycle. Let me explain it this way. Imagine you have a tree that grows money leaves. Every season it produces 5% new leaves. If you protect the tree, it keeps growing forever. But if you chop at it for quick cash, you'll have firewood for a month and regret for a lifetime. Most people chop their tree the moment it starts producing shade. They can't resist spending the yield and then the trunk. They call it enjoying life. I call it economic suicide with good lighting. Warren and I always believe the best investors are those who play defense first. We're not trying to get rich fast. We're trying to avoid being poor again. People forget that's how we started. Broke, cautious, and allergic to risk we didn't understand. Every dollar mattered. That habit never left. The worst investors chase return. The best investors chase survival. They know if they stay in the game long enough, compounding will do the heavy lifting. But you can't compound what you've already lost. And that's why we avoid leverage like a plague. Leverage makes you look smart till it doesn't. Then it wipes you out completely. One bad quarter, one surprise rate hike gone. I've seen brilliant people borrow their way to bankruptcy. They always say the same thing. This time is different. No, it isn't. Debt plus ego equals disaster. Always has, always will. Preserving capital doesn't mean hiding cash under the mattress. It means structuring your life so you never have to sell in a panic. If your expenses are low and your patience is high, you can wait out any storm. That's real power, not the ability to predict the market, but the ability to endure it. Everyone wants higher returns. Few deserve them. Because higher returns require higher intelligence, higher discipline, or both. Most people don't have either in sufficient supply. That's why I prefer boring investments, businesses that make sense, products people will still need in 30 years, and balance sheets that can survive a recession. Boring keeps you alive. Excitement makes you broke. I'd rather make 8% forever than 20% one year and negative 40 the next. But the world loves roller coasters, not railroads. Look at all the bubbles we've lived through. 1969, 1987, 2000, 2008. Each one started with a simple story. This time is different. It never is. Human nature doesn't evolve as fast as technology. Fear and greed are still running the software. That's why your main job as an investor isn't to outsmart the market. It's to outlast your own impulses. Capital preservation is about humility. It's accepting that you're not omniscient, that black swans exist, and that the world doesn't care about your optimism. When you preserve capital, you preserve optionality, the right to act when everyone else is paralyzed. That's how real fortunes are built, not in bull markets, but in crashes when cash becomes the most valuable asset on earth. In times of panic, people sell what they should hold and hold what they should sell. We buy what they're dumping. That's not courage, it's preparation. You can't be greedy when others are fearful, if you're also broke when others are fearful. So I tell people, keep cash, keep patience, keep humility. Those are the assets that compound longest. Here's the paradox most people miss. You make more money over a lifetime by avoiding big losses than by chasing big gains. Compounding rewards the cautious. It punishes the reckless. And remember, inflation is a quiet thief. If your money isn't growing faster than prices, you're getting poorer even while your balance looks stable. That's why I like real businesses, productive assets that generate cash. Not speculation, not illusions, just tangible value. Factories, utilities, consumer goods, boring survivors. The trick isn't to swing for home runs. It's to keep hitting singles without striking out. I've said it before, you don't need brilliance to get rich. You just need a lifetime of not being stupid. Capital preservation is simply the art of avoiding stupidity year after year, decade after decade. The market rewards the patient, but it worships the survivors. So ask yourself, every time you touch your portfolio, every time you take a risk, am I protecting the tree or am I chopping at it for short-term comfort? Your answer to that question will decide whether you end up free or frantic. The older I get, the more convinced I am that complexity is a form of stupidity, not the kind that screams at you, but the quiet kind, the kind that hides behind jargon, status, and self-importance. People love to make things complicated because it makes them feel smart. They think using 10 words instead of one proves intelligence. In reality, it proves insecurity. Simplicity isn't ignorance. It's clarity. It's what remains after you've filtered out nonsense. In investing, business, and life, the smartest people I've met were the ones who made decisions you could explain to a child. If your reasoning needs a PowerPoint, it's probably bad reasoning. We built Berkshire Hathaway on that idea. We didn't need quantum algorithms or 20 analysts with PhDs. We just bought understandable businesses at fair prices and let time do what it always does, compound. That's simplicity, and it works better than anything else. But simplicity is hard because ego hates it. The human mind craves complexity. It wants to feel in control. And control in finance is the biggest illusion there is. When people say, I understand the market, what they really mean is, I've been lucky so far. Simplicity protects you from that delusion. It forces you to stay humble. It reminds you that most of the world runs just fine without your opinions. Here's a good rule. If you can't explain your investment strategy without a spreadsheet, you probably don't have one. Same goes for your personal finances. If you need an app to tell you whether you're broke, you're already broke. The average person doesn't need complex financial products. They need three things: a decent savings rate, a diversified portfolio, and the ability to sit still. That's it. Everything else is noise sold by people who profit from your confusion. I've met countless investors who drowned in complexity. They thought diversification meant owning 50 different tickers. It really means not being dependent on any single idiot, including yourself. You can run a good life on a few simple rules. Spend less than you earn. Avoid that. Invest in what you understand. Don't be an ass. That last one fixes more problems than compound interest ever will. But modern society doesn't reward simple virtues. It rewards noise. The more chaotic something looks, the more sophisticated people assume it is. They're wrong. Confusion is not sophistication. It's camouflage for incompetence. I've sat in countless meetings where executives complicated simple decisions just to justify their existence. The smartest person in the room is often the one who says, "Why don't we just keep doing what already works?" That's not laziness, that's wisdom. Repetition of sound behavior beats reinvention of stupidity. If you think you're too clever for simple rules, the market will remind you otherwise. Simplicity also applies to lifestyle. People complicate their lives until they can't breathe. Too many possessions, too many commitments, too much noise. Then they call it success. If your calendar owns you, you're not successful, you're employed by chaos. Freedom lives in simplicity. The fewer moving parts, the fewer things that can break. That applies to portfolios and to marriages. I've always preferred quiet wealth to loud struggle. The man who knows how much is enough will always outlive the man who never stops calculating. Here's a test I use. If your solution requires adjectives, it's probably wrong. Good decisions are nouns and verbs, clear, strong, and boring. People laugh when I say boring. They think it means dull. But in truth, boring is just stable, repeated competence. That's what compounds in capital, reputation, and wisdom. You want to see the opposite? Look at Wall Street in 2008. Thousands of people using exotic terms for simple greed. Derivatives so complex, even their creators didn't understand the risk. And when it all collapsed, they acted surprised. That's not intelligence, that's arrogance with a calculator. You can't outsmart math. You can only respect it. The same logic applies to life outside money. Simplicity in relationships, in diet, in routine. These are the true luxuries of age. Warren eats like a 6-year-old and reads all day. He's not doing that because he's eccentric. He's doing it because it keeps life simple enough for his brain to focus on what matters, decisions, and peace. I do the same. We're both allergic to unnecessary complexity. We've seen what it does. It drains focus, amplifie stress, and makes you feel busy while accomplishing nothing. The goal isn't to do more, it's to need less. You don't need to manage 10 projects or 20 accounts. You need a system that runs quietly in the background so you can spend your time thinking, reading, or resting, not fixing mistakes born from chaos. Here's the funny part. Simplicity looks like laziness to the undisciplined. They mistake calm for weakness, but they forget the calmest water hides the greatest depth. Simplicity gives you back your most valuable asset, attention. And attention, when properly directed, turns into judgment. The only real edge any investor ever has. If you can simplify your money, your schedule, and your desires, you've already beaten 99% of the population. They'll still be chasing complexity. You'll be compounding sanity. People always want more. It's the default setting of human nature. More money, more praise, more everything. But more is a disease with no cure, only management. You never see anyone overdose on enough. It's always more that kills them. I've lived long enough to see rich men ruin themselves because they couldn't stop playing the game after they'd already won. They thought just one more deal would bring peace. It didn't. It brought chaos. You know why? Because peace doesn't scale. Once you have enough, anything extra is just noise. People think contentment is laziness. It's not. It's the rarest form of intelligence, the wisdom to recognize when the chase is doing more harm than good. The world keeps moving the goalposts. When you make your first 100,000, you start dreaming of 1,000,000. At 1,000,000, you want 10. At 10, you want recognition. And at recognition, you start craving immortality. It never ends. It's a treadmill powered by envy and fueled by insecurity. If you don't step off intentionally, the treadmill will carry you until you collapse. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't need millions to live well. You need clarity. Clarity about what enough looks like for you. But people never define that. They just copy the ambitions of others. That's why they wake up one day with a nice house, a hollow life, and no idea how they got there. If you don't know where enough is, you'll spend your life running past it. I've watched people climb to enormous wealth only to find they've built a golden cage. They can't slow down because their lifestyle won't let them. They can't stop because their ego won't let them. They mistake momentum for meaning. When I was younger, I thought money would solve every problem. Then I got some and realized the real benefit wasn't luxury, it was independence. Freedom from nonsense, freedom from bosses, freedom to think in peace. After that, the extra zeros stopped mattering. If you can pay your bills, control your time, and avoid idiots, you've already won the game. Everything beyond that is vanity accounting. People love to complicate it, but the formula is simple. Wealth equals what you have minus what you need. The smaller the second number, the richer you are. I know people with $50 million who need 60. They're poor. I know people with modest savings and no anxiety. They're rich. The trick is to align your money with your psychology. If your expectations grow faster than your returns, you'll always feel behind, no matter the balance. That's why enough is the ultimate advantage. Once you find it, nobody can manipulate you anymore. Not the market, not advertisers, not politicians. You stop being part of the herd. You stop trading peace for prestia. The culture hates that idea because it can't sell it. Enough doesn't generate clicks or sales. It doesn't make your neighbor jealous. It just makes you calm, and calm doesn't trend. But calm is where wisdom lives. When you no longer need to prove anything, your brain starts working properly. You stop chasing status and start observing reality. You see how much stupidity runs the world and how little of it you actually need to participate in. That's a revelation most people never reach because they're too busy refreshing their portfolio. I once said envy is the dumbest of all sins because it's the only one that gives you no pleasure. You gain nothing, you just hurt yourself. But envy drives the modern economy. Entire industries exist to make you feel inadequate. The antidote is gratitude, not the fake kind you post about online, but the quiet kind that lets you sit alone with your life and say, this is good enough. The irony is, once you truly feel that, you start making better decisions. You take fewer stupid risks. You keep more of your wealth. And that wealth compounds quietly because it's not being constantly traded for validation. Enough is not a finish line. It's a philosophy. It's the point where logic wins over greed. You don't stop improving yourself. You stop inflating yourself. You stop trying to outshine people and start trying to outlast them. And here's what happens next. You become impossible to control because the man who knows enough can't be bribed with more. That's real freedom. Not yachts, not private jets, but the ability to say no without fear of loss. The world will call you boring. Let it. Boring people sleep well, and sleeping well is the highest dividend money ever pays. If you want to measure wealth properly, don't count your possessions. Count your untroubled hours. Because in the end, that's all the game was ever about. Your time, your choices, and your peace. Everything else is noise.